Welcome to this episode of Getting My Cheese Back on My Cracker, and I am your host, Atomic Travels, Paige Benjamin. And today, you normally would see Ashley Nicole, but we have Brother Copeland. Brother Copeland, could you please introduce yourself?
Hey, everybody. I'm Cope.
All right. And in this episode, we're going to talk about the state of the Black man's mental health. Let's meet our panelists. Larry?
What's up, y'all? Larry Meadows, a.k.a. Loco, brother of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. I'm originally from Washington, D.C., living in Pittsburgh now. Also did some time in New York City. So looking forward to sharing with y'all today.
And what do you do, if you don't mind me asking?
Currently, I work for Pittsburgh Public Schools. I do family and community engagement. So I run all of the parent programs in the entire school district, and I provide research to the superintendent's executive team.
Awesome. All right. Brother Jay.
Yes, sir. I'm Jay Carr, Houston native, graduate from Prairie View A&M University, aka Highly Flavored. That's why I do my music, all my creative stuff under former podcast host, future podcast host, all those things.
Okay, appreciate it. Future podcast host. So, we looking forward to some collaborations in the future, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. We're going to get right into it, right? So our mental health seems to be something that is easily dismissed as men. What do you think is the current state of Black men's mental wellness? And you guys, anybody can jump on.
Well, I'll jump on in. I think that currently it's a lot better than it was, you know what I'm saying, with the previous generation and the ones before that. A lot of us seek out help. Whether it be through a therapist, whether it be through actually going to the doctor, getting our physical education, whether it be self-care. We do a lot of those things that, wouldn't have happened before. It could be better, but it's way better than it was.
Yeah, and I think it's a sliding scale, depending on who you talk to, because I think for people who don't suffer from depression, like we're pretty much okay. But a lot of my friends who suffer from depression have said that the global pandemic and, the job situation has been a little bit stressful for them and added to that. So I think for some, this is a rough time. But I think those are kind of like brothers who are also quiet most of the time and not really going to like broadcast, hey, I'm going through something right now. So but I think for some people, it's a real rough time right now.
So how are you two doing? Because I know Cope and I, we really have a conversation almost every other week, and we check in on each other. But do you guys have somebody that does a constant check-in on when you're not at your best?
Yeah, myself, I have a group of friends, my brothers, my own mother. If I don't call her once a week, she thinks something happened to me. I got kidnapped or something. So it's a lot of that happening, and I think especially lately I've been able to communicate to my friends to check on your strong friend, which usually that's me. So a lot of them are doing a lot better of a job on that end.
Yeah, and I'm usually the guy that does the checking in on my friends. So I talk to a lot of people on a regular basis. But because I'm always that guy that reaches out to my friends, most people are like, "Oh, we don't need to check on Loco. He's fine." But when the pandemic first hit, it was rough. Being a single Black man, all my friends is like holed up with their wives and children, and I'm like by myself for like an extended period of time. And I'm a people person, and I love to be around people. So it was like I was kind of like thrown off my axis for a little bit, but I've adapted. But it was rough being a single man in a global pandemic. It's a little bit rough.
So let me ask you guys real quick, because, as a Black man, we all know that no matter where we are, if we're in the mud, we got to get it out the mud. And, being that strong friend also, I want to know, like, how does it actually make you feel when people check in on you? Because it's not like you're not going to get done what you got to get done anyway. But how does that actually make you feel when people are just checking in on you? Like, what does that do for you?
It's a mixed bag for me. On one end, I'm like, this is weird because this is my job. You know what I'm saying? This is what I normally handle. So when people call me, part of me is like, what do you need? What do you want? You know what I'm saying? Because you're checking in on me, that means normally I feel like it's going to hand over to them at any second. And I'm like, that's something I'm working on myself. The other part of it is, I'm grateful that somebody is wanting to check on me. And I think a lot of it is because for the longest I just let that go. I just let them not check on me, just was out here dealing with it by myself. But at some point I said, hey, I need to reach out and tell people, hey, check on me sometimes. Let's see how I'm doing, because even though I may be doing fine all the time, you never know when it may be my turn.
Yeah. And for me, it recharges my battery when I hear from my friends. I'm 46. I'll be 47 in a couple of weeks, and as you get older, your circle of friends gets smaller. So when I get from one of I call them my platinum level friends. Those people are actually, if something happened, I know I could call them up and they'll be like, I'm gonna be there in about an hour. You don't have many of those. So when I get a call from those people, I'm like, all right, I'm good. My tribe is checking in on me. But other than that, yeah, man, it just recharges my battery. I would encourage anybody watching this, checking on people. Go through your phone and find the name of somebody you haven't seen in a while and just text them or call them and be like, hey, I was just checking up on you. It helps.
Okay. Femi, do you mind introducing yourself and tell us what you do?
Femi.
I think he's having some technical difficulties. But but no. So with that being said, right? Jay, you mentioned it's a mixed bag, right? Because one of the things that you mentioned earlier was that you are usually that strong guy. Do you find it that it's something that is driven in you, or something like society makes it seem like the strong person shouldn't be asking something from, or shouldn't be receiving from those that are, I don't want to say weaker, but those that seem like they need it the most?
Yeah, society tells you that you shouldn't really need anybody, especially as a male, a black male in this society. You're supposed to go out and get it.
I hear me?
Yes, sir. Our own people you kind of grow up like that too. It's kind of like, if you hurt yourself, man up, stand up, you know what I'm saying? Wipe it off, shrug your shoulders, go on about your business. And so a lot of that tells you to go on and go get it. You're a man, you should be able to figure it out. And so when you're in that situation and people want to check on you, it's like a weird feeling because of that. The other part of it is because I myself, I'm the oldest of four. So being the oldest child is a whole different thing. They expect more from you. They expect you to be able to take care of yourself and your siblings at some point in life. So that mentality is ingrained as well.
You're on mute, Purge. You're on mute.
I want to take this opportunity to tell those watching, please feel free to contribute, ask questions in the live, because I know the gentlemen are here and open to talking about the things that are most important to us all, is our mental wellness. So with that being said, what are some of the barriers that you guys feel as though that for yourself as well as us as men, that's kind of preventing us or impeding us from reaching that goal of being mentally well?
I think it's just a big part of it is the way we raised. We all, our elders have taught us, you a man, you got to take care of the family, you got to protect the family. As black men, we live in a world where we're targets every day. We got to think about, as soon as we walk out the house, if I get pulled over by the police, what's going to happen? If I say the wrong thing at work, what's going to happen? So I think there's like the way we grew up, and then there's like the worldwide factors of I have to put my mask on to get through the workday. And And if I do something, I could lose my livelihood, or I could lose my life if I say the wrong thing or look at somebody the wrong way. So I think a lot of that is like we just got to stay tough all the time. We got to present like we're tough all the time. We have a hyper masculine culture, especially the bros. Like the brothers of Omega Psi Phi are extremely aggressive with each other. You got to stay in shape. And even internally, there's that stress. Like if the bros like test me, I'm gonna have to like poke my chest out a little bit. So it's nonstop. It's nonstop for us. And like when you think about stopping to say, hey, like I'm just mentally like exhausted. Like that now it's like you're vulnerable now. You're like, is somebody gonna try to like, take advantage of me because I'm trying to share out. So it's a lot of pressure.
And piggybacking off what you just said, especially when it comes to your brothers, your natural brothers, your frat brothers, all these type of things, like we all kind of grew up similarly. And so it's hard to be the one to take the step to say, I'm not right. I'm not all right now. You know what I'm saying? Because you don't want to be that person in front of everybody. And, all of us are walking around here and a lot of us ain't all right. But, we don't feel comfortable enough to either talk about it or say something like that. And then the other thing you touched on, which is a guarantee, is just trust. It's kind of hard to trust people. It's hard to trust medical professionals. It's hard to trust, counselors. It's hard to trust pastors. It's hard to trust all these people, you know what I'm saying? Because sometimes I feel like they're not trying to hear what you're trying to say. They're just trying to tell you something.
Yep.
And everything is not going to work the same for each person.
So I want to ask this question, right? Dr. Alade just mentioned, what do you guys define as manhood, right? And the reason I brought this is very important based on the fact that you touched on hypermasculinity. You touched earlier about it's weak to ask for help, right? What does manhood really look like? I know as Omega we define it one way, but in reality, what really is it for you all? And I know Copeland wanted to start the conversation with some anecdotal piece. So Cope, you want to touch on that, and then we can come back to the question around manhood, because I think it ties in.
So I kind of have been working myself on becoming a better person. Like I think I'm in like the top 5% of the world of dope individuals already. But notwithstanding, I feel like, eternal and perpetual growth should be the goal. So I'm trying to become a better person. And so I'm paying attention to things now. And, I actually have been attracting a lot of good people into my life, like people I can trust. But still, like, I have a hard time when I'm going through something to ever be the one to reach out. And I'm also working on actually identifying the feelings that I have, because a lot of the feelings that I have, I'll label them something and then I'll react to them really by hiding in my grind. And when I do that, I realized this week, thanks to Paige actually, and it kind of made me get to thinking that what I actually end up doing when I go into that space is that I stop showing up for other people. And the type of people that I know that the three of us are, or the four of us on this call, when a lot of people really need for us to just show up. He's still working on it. But so I realized that it's been a while and I was feeling sad. And instead of actually sitting with it, I kind of just dug into my grind. But that feeling stopped me, because I'm always on my grind, but that feeling stopped me from being accessible to people. Like I was missing phone calls and I wouldn't even check. Like I wasn't even checking to see if I had missed phone calls or missed text messages. Like if you didn't catch me when I was looking at my phone, then it was a wrap. And so I really think that I don't know what the solution is though. And that's where I'm stuck at, because I don't even know what I would be asking for in that instance, because what I need to do to solve the problem is on me.
So do you think that what was at one time defined as you being a man was that And I think we've touched on this a couple of times, right? Being able to solve the issues yourself, not asking anybody for help. Because I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I was nervous with Cope, a little bit. I was like, hey brother, you're not reaching out. What's going on? Are you okay? He was like, look, things just haven't been going my way all week. And we talked it through. And he was like, you know what? I acknowledge my shortcomings and realize that I do need to be a better person, a better friend, just a better person all around. With that being said, with his story, do you guys think of what society defines as manhood is something that was kind of hindering him from being able to go past versus what we define manhood as us as individuals?
Well,
I think it's a mix of that. Go ahead.
Let me jump in real quick. I've been having a bit of technical difficulty, but how are we speaking here? How are we doing? I
free
like
speaking, brother. Free speaking. Safe space.
It's a free speak. It's a safe
Okay.
space to have a conversation.
We're in the barbershop.
I haven't said that. You're talking about manhood and who we talking about here?
We're talking about individuals. As an individual, how do you define manhood? Because Copeland was talking about how he find himself sometimes when he's in a rut that it's difficult to reach out when he's in that moment. And sometimes in hindsight, he realizes that, you know what, I should have reached out to Paige or Loco or Alade or whomever that's in his circle to kind of open up. Because, as we mentioned earlier, the fact that society makes us look weak for opening up and being vulnerable, or people take advantage, as Jay mentioned, of that vulnerability, we tend not to. And so with that being said, how do we define manhood?
Yeah, I think manhood is being who you are, whether you're more of an introvert or extrovert, and if you feel like you have to communicate, if you have to open up, so here's the thing, society places these they put us in boxes, right? And me personally, I think manhood is not being put in a box. Being who you are, being true to who you are. Folks. Some folks, keep everything bottled up inside. And it might go to how they were raised. Because how we were raised or how we're raised plays a big part. It's all a cycle. If all you saw growing up was your dad or men around you keeping things bottled up inside, and they take it out on a bottle or they take it out in, on these substances, then more than likely, you might end up doing the same thing or going down that path as well. But, me personally, I tend to lean on my family, my parents, my brother, sister, those in that circle. When I open up, it's certain things that one might not share, and you deal with it. How your mind or how you tend to deal with things, whether it's engaging in your hobby more, something that gives you passion or some form of escape. Hopefully it's as you get older, hopefully it's you choose things to escape from reality in a positive sense, like in terms of exercise, reading, things of that nature. But all in all, I think manhood is just taking care of yourself, not leaning on anyone, so to speak.
I think Loco wanted to jump in on that real quick.
Sure.
Yeah. So two things. So the not leaning on anyone, I would respectfully disagree with that one a little bit, because every now and then, like it's good to have somebody to lean on.
Well, financially speaking.
Okay.
Financially.
Right. So then I want to go back to like something else you mentioned. You said as we get older. So I think when I was in my early 20s and in college, I defined manhood much differently than I do now as a 46-year-old. I kind of look at it, if there was a chart from like a high level of energy and a low level of like knowledge. And as you get older, it kind of switches place. So you have like a higher level of knowledge and a lower level of energy. And you have to make the adjustment along that sliding scale, because like when I was young, manhood was like, yo, what's up? Like, let's go. Now I'm like, hey, let's talk this out now. So I think you make better decisions because, and this is real, because I own property now. Like I have family that I'm responsible for financially.
Correct.
And when I'm younger, I was out there I was being out with the bros. I was partying and I was road tripping. I had like no responsibilities.
Whatever, whenever.
So I didn't understand, like I hadn't lived enough to understand what manhood really is. And Femi has like a family and children now. So he's like, I've known Femi for 25 years, 26 years. He's a much different person, much more mature person now than we were when we were back in the 90s. So I just wanted to kind of make that contribution to, depending on how old the listeners and the viewers are, like their definition of manhood might be something different.
You're right. I mean, I totally agree with you as far as that shift in like you said, high energy, low knowledge. And as you slowly get older, it should shift, it should. And then, but I think the key is to manage that shift, right? To manage it and make sure that one day, and make sure that it goes at a nice steady pace, because just because we're older, we should have a level of energy as well, right? So you don't want to be without energy but full of knowledge. You still want to have that enthusiasm for life as well.
Yeah, so, I wanted to jump in on what Copeland was asking specifically about his situation. A lot of times, we define manhood in the heteronormative type of standards, like the masculine is the masculine, the feminine is the feminine, and some of those things keep us from getting what we really need. For example, a lot of us would say that women like to come and vent and don't want a solution to the problem. And while that may be the truth, sometimes we want to do that too. And that may be the situation that you're in, where you're in that state where you need to vent, you need to get that off your chest. It's not necessarily that it's going to solve anything, but that getting it out makes you feel better a lot of the time when you actually try it. So I would say be intentional about reaching out. That's the way I look at things, is that when you're in that situation, I know it's hard, and you're like, hey, how do I do this? It's about making yourself do the hard part first, being intentional about reaching out. And so that eventually that becomes a habit, it becomes a practice of something. So when you do have a time where you really need somebody, you already had that mentality that it's okay for me to reach out. And I've done it enough to where people understand that I'm not playing. It's something that I need help with, and y'all can be there to support me.
Right. And I want to touch on that really quick. I currently have 4 people I care about like a lot in my immediate circle that are currently like dealing with depression. And I'm always saying that, like, hey, just reach out to me. And their response is, that's not the way it works. They're like, that's not the way it works. Like when you're depressed, you don't call people and ask for help. You avoid people. So I would say if you are a friend on the outside and you notice some behavior, or you haven't heard from someone you care about, like reach out to them or send them a text message just saying, hey, checking in, haven't heard from you, love you. I do that to a lot of my friends. I don't talk to a lot of my friends often, but I send check-in messages like, hey, thinking about you, sending you some positive energy. And a lot of times a month later, I'll hear from somebody and they say, you know what? I haven't responded to you, but I got all your texts. Thank you. I really appreciate you checking in, even though I don't call you back. You always send me text messages. So I just want to share that experience with the listeners and the viewers, because a lot of times people who are in a bad place mentally, like they're gonna turn inside and they're not gonna talk to people. So
I appreciate you bringing that. And if you guys can see the comment that I brought up on the screen, right? Mothers of young Black men are appreciating this conversation, and this is why we're having it, right? So we're in a very emo generation today, right? Everybody's depressed, everybody's going through something. And when I say emo, it's more so driven towards the youth, right? If you look at the music that's being put out, it's a lot different from where we were before, but it's allowing the youth to express somewhat their feelings a lot more. Do you think your younger selves would be this vulnerable, or do you think your younger selves were taught to be this vulnerable as the youth today are? Because I think the youth today are a lot more in tune with how they're feeling to an extent, right? And being able to openly express it.
I don't think the environment that a lot of us came up in was, great for that. Like at home, I was fine, but when you get out with your friends and get among your peers, a lot of times we didn't have the environment to be open, which is crazy because now those same people are the people I'm open with the most because my friends actually became that circle. Even though when we were all young, like you said, that high energy kept us from even sitting down and thinking about how we were feeling in the moment. And I think a lot of that was due to seeing a lot of young deaths around us. You know what I'm saying? Seeing people die that were either younger than us or close our age. It made us kind of change how we were looking at things, how we viewed certain things because, you know, we grew up in a day and age where you don't even tell your partners you love them. You know what I'm saying? So now that's something I do often. I let them know. I let them know I love them. I let them know that, I'm grateful to have them in my life. I appreciate them. I say these things to them. I don't just, let my actions do all the stuff. Sometimes you gotta let your words do some things too, because sometimes actions are great. We have to do that. We're great at that as Black men and showing things through our actions. But sometimes words are just as important. Sometimes people need to hear that we're proud of them, that we appreciate them, that we love them, that we see what they're doing, we see what they're achieving. Those things kind of are something that a lot of us are missing out on, and it's great to hear from your own friends.
Yeah.
What was the question again? No, I mean we covered a lot right there.
No.
Yeah,
So,
we did. We
this
really
is funny
did.
because my follow-up question was before Jay. I was going to interject before Jay did, but I was going to ask the question that he answered, which is what happens when what you need isn't a tangible thing?
Right.
And that's the question that basically that he answered, because we got it is our thing, but the help that we need isn't really with the execution of the thing that we're talking about. Like it's on a whole nother level. And I think you touched on a very important part, which is the fact that, we demonized our women for that, for the venting thing. Like nobody wants to just hear somebody vent. But I think a big part of that is because we had so much going on too that we never vented about. And so there wasn't the space. And maybe sometimes we do. Maybe that's exactly because you're right. I'm sitting here trying to think about it myself as I'm reflecting on it. Like maybe that's all I really needed was just to vent about it, because I still got to do what I got to do no matter what. But that shouldn't be an excuse to just sit there stewing, which I would do sometimes until, the right person came. The universe sends the right person along to come and deflate this for me.
Yeah.
So to revisit the question for you, Loco, is your younger self, would you have been able to be this vulnerable as a kid? And I think as Jay mentioned, as a kid, the same people that he was as a kid, kind of like, doing the dozens, your mama jokes, they didn't really give you a chance to kind of like express yourself. But as he got older, those same people that would probably joke on him for being sensitive are the people he's actually the most sensitive with today.
Right. My childhood was different. My trauma points were being the light skinned kid in public schools in DC. I had a big yellow sandy brown afro and like blue eyes. And it was just like, shut up, white boy. Shut up. And they would chase me around the playground. And that's why I learned how to play football, because I could run. They never caught me. But that was my trauma growing up. I had a super loving and tight family. I come from a family of like fighters. So like my neighborhood was like, my family was like known. They were like, don't mess with the Meadows. They're crazy. So like I grew up with a lot of confidence instilled in me. So I didn't, my issues with like my life and being vulnerable didn't start until I got out of college and I started like reading on like real history and like the reality of like that most of the struggles we go through are by design. They came from laws that are still in effect. Racist people who are in decision-making positions like judges and people who give out jobs and redlining and concealing us to like, and then I was just like, oh my God, like, oh my God, like this, they designed this, they did all of this. So I didn't realize till I was an adult, like how bad it was, how truly bad it was, like the struggle that we were looking at. When I was young, I was just partying and I was having fun. And then it was like the knowledge increase was a slow, intentional thing. So I don't know, like my younger, and I just wanted to introduce the colorism / hueism to the conversation also. But I don't know if I could have, gone back and told my younger self, because on the other hand, I believe that like everything we go through is on purpose. Like one of the things that Cope said earlier, he said, like, I'm not where I want to be, or I thought I was going to be. And I've heard that from so many people. And that's grounded in like, we put these expectations on ourselves of where we're supposed to be at a certain time in life. And, I've kind of accepted the fact that I'm right where I'm supposed to be. And I'll figure out tomorrow. But that has taken 45 years for me to come to. So.
Wow. I got 4 more years till I get
so it's funny you mentioned the colorism. I mean, there's also the culture issue as well, right? So, I mean, not to be on no, taking your glory, but just being light skinned wasn't enough, right? I'm Haitian American, right? Born here, but because they hear a different accent from my parents, I was tied into the African booty scratcher. The negative stereotypes about voodoo, just all these little things. So I think, I'm like Copeland, I'm a couple years behind you. I want to go back to the original question, right? What do you think were the systemic issues, right, that kind of stopped us from growing mentally, right? Because you talk about colorism, you're talking about hypermasculinity. We're talking about cultural differences within society. So y'all think that for us as Black men, it is the slave history, or you guys think it's just a continuous, and I don't want to go too deep into it, but a continuous effort to keep us docile or out of control, within control?
I think the slave history has a big part to do with it.
Say it again.
I think the slave history / mentality has a lot to do with how we are now. I mean, being in that situation for 400 plus years, it tends to have an effect on you, man. I mean, even getting out of that situation, you have our grandfathers, grandmothers, and elders that still maintain a lot of those the side effects. Just because we're not in in that position, but the effect of that still permeates our culture. And until you know that, you can kind of break out of that. Like even the food, like the food we eat, things such as the food we eat, not wanting to not having the desire to cook for yourself, to grow your own crops, to feed, to sustain yourself. The type of food we eat, the fried food, but until one knows that, then they can try to turn that around. But I definitely agree that it's the slave, our position as slaves in this country does have a profound effect on how we look at things right now.
And I think
Yeah.
there's a book called Cast Out by Isabel Wilkerson, and it talks about the whole concept of when white folks say to black people, you need to know your place. There's a artificial hierarchy in America that where the white man is at the top and the black man is at the bottom. And I think what Brother Femi just talked about kind of speaks to that hierarchy. It's always trying to keep black folks down, have us think less. They don't want our children to understand what their potential is. They just want them to fight in the streets and fill up the jail cells and the graveyards. So yeah, that's what I got for you.
Also, I think the other thing, definitely the slave thing, because my great grandmother and my great great grandmother was a slave. My great grandmother was the first generation of freed. So that's not that far as far as generations go. Like I met this person who was the first person in our family that was born free. So I think a lot of times, people forget that when they're looking at the history. But the other thing is, I think a lot of our traditions that were born here in America kind of do some holding back to us in this day and age. One of the biggest ones is faith. Depending on what you believe, depending on how people handle that, I don't think faith is the problem itself, but how people teach that to you and use that with you. A lot of times you go to your pastor for counseling or anything like that, and they just tell you to pray about it. And that's not enough. I keep telling people, if you read the Bible yourself, you learn a lot. One of the things I learned in there is that main thing is faith without works is dead. So praying about it, God don't want you to just pray and go on about your business. He wants you to pray and then do something. And so a lot of times we don't get that aspect from those kind of counselors. That's why I always tell people it's good to go to your pastor, but you also need to go to a non-faith-based counselor if you're seeking that kind of help, because you need to hear different aspects.
I just wanted to throw it in a perspective real quick, because I want to push back against the slave mentality thing, because it kind of does something to me in my head as I'm seeing the picture. And it's kind of saying like these are mentalities that were passed on from our previous generations. And so first off, I want to like kind of just give props to our parents and stuff, because they survived. They were doing what they had to do in the moment. And while we're learning new things, I don't want it to ever get out there that because I know of all of us, we love our parents to death. We know what they went through. And even though it may not fit now, it's not necessarily a bad thing that they did. They were trying to survive. Like, I really want to touch on a little bit of what Loco was saying, because we have to understand that there are systems in place. And without going too deep into what history does in education, we know that our kids are being taught by symbols and images. There is a group of people out there whose symbol is John Wayne, the I won't take anything from anybody, I'm going to defend my way, and I am me type of person. That's a symbol. That's not our symbol that we're being fed. Our symbol that was being fed was Martin Luther King. And it wasn't even a true depiction of the final where Martin Luther King got to. So I really want to, for me, I came to a place when I got older too, because I was one of the black people who was mad at black people, who was like, why can't we all just get along? And all of that stuff, right? And I was big in personal accountability, because I never let anybody coerce me, no systems. I'm like the biggest nonconformist I know. But then I started to realize, like, not everybody had the experience that I did. And there are systems out there in place for the normal people, and it's guiding them in a way. And it's not because have less character or they have less ambition or drive. A lot of it is just a thing that was killed in them. And I'm grateful that we're having this conversation now because we're getting that thing back. It's that thing that took Naruto from just using regular chakra to going into sage mode. But we'll talk about that later.
Okay. So, with all that being said, I want to ask another question here, right? A question was asked earlier when we went on live to introduce this. How do we add the women in our lives into this conversation, right? How do and the question really is as simple as how do we let our women allow us to how do we communicate to our women in allowing us to be vulnerable? And it's a weird way for me to put the question, but the question to them is how can we allow a space for us as men to be vulnerable without feeling like it will be used against us or weaponized against us? Because we want them to be vulnerable with us, but we find it very difficult to turn it in a different direction, the other direction.
I'm gonna start with us because the one of the biggest thing I notice when it comes to men is we choose to be vulnerable with the intention of something else. So I've found that building relationships with female friends and having homegirls is a lot easier to be vulnerable with them than it would be to be with somebody you're with, because that person you're with, a lot of times when they get upset, that's where weaponizing comes in. So I think starting with us, we have to kind of build trust with people first. And a lot of times the hard part about that is when you're building trust with people, you want to be vulnerable in that moment. You want to immediately jump into it. And we can't just jump into it quickly. It's kind of like when you look at people and you say, oh, you fell in love too fast, you know what I'm saying? That type of stuff. It's that same type of situation. So you want to build that type of trust. Another thing is you got to be able to understand that just because this one person did something to you like that doesn't mean that's everybody. I think we have a one and done mentality a lot of times where everybody else has to suffer.
Can you see that question?
I can now.
Can you touch on that also before you pass it on? I would just like to hear. Like, I feel like that would be a good goes in really well.
Honestly, the realest way to do that is effective communication. I think a lot of times we don't sit down and talk to be heard, to have a conversation, to get to the depth of something. I think a lot of times we are talking to solve a problem, and sometimes that talking to just solve a problem skips over a lot of the stuff we need emotionally and how to be cared for. So I think effective communication is basically making sure that when you're talking to someone, you're talking with intention. You have an intent to learn something, you have an intent to get somebody to understand, and an intent to clarify something. And a lot of times we don't do that. We just try to solve a problem, or we try to get the information we need to solve it ourselves, when this is a team effort.
Okay, so just wanted to kind of I know I didn't do a proper introduction of Brother Femi and so Brother Yeldell just jumped in. So Brother Femi, can you tell us who you are? I know we're a bit mid, but a lot of people just seen you jump into the conversation without a little introduction. So if you can introduce yourself real quick, and then Brother Yeldell, can you go ahead and introduce yourself as well?
Sure. My name is Femi Fakalade. Full name is Olufemi. Went to University of Pittsburgh, graduated in 1996. Supposed to graduate in 1995, but that's another story. I'm a member of Omega Psi Phi. That's how I'm tied to Brother Page and Brother Loco. I'm also a mentor. Well, mentor on the Royal Project.
The Royalty Project.
Yeah. So I did 2 sessions. I'm thinking of taking on another session depending on when it shuts down.
Okay.
I live in Bowie, Maryland. My mother is from Dayton, Ohio.
Okay.
My dad is from Nigeria.
All right.
I was born in Hartford. I'm a brother. I have a sister, and I have an older brother. And I'm a father and a husband, 2 kids, ages 8 and 11.
Father of 2 young black boys.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir. Yes, sir.
That's
Brother,
exactly.
the most important stat right there.
there you go.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
we're gonna touch back on that. We're gonna touch back on that. Mr. Mike.
Yeah, so I'm Mike Yeldell, originally from DC. Went to school, University of Pittsburgh as well. Member of Omega Psi Phi, OSI. So my connection to Purge there. I'm living in Austin, Texas, working in corporate finance right now. So excited to be a part of the conversation. Sorry, I'm a little bit late. I was here. I just didn't know how to, get connected to the stream.
No problem, no problem. So we're gonna and I think Julian, Dr. Julian, my apologies, rephrase the question for me exceptionally. So if you can all see the question on the bottom of the screen, how can we teach our women how we need to be cared for and attended to from an emotional perspective? I think brother CJ answered the question to his perspective. So anybody else, please feel free to jump in on that.
My answer is sure.
Actually, before I'm gonna put Brother Yeldell on the spot. From a younger statesman in this conversation, right? We talked about systemic blockades to us seeking our mental wellness. We talked about and this is also a recap for everybody just joining us. We talked about where we are mentally. We talked about the blockades to seeking mental wellness. And we also talked about what manhood meant to us and how, there's this perceived or socially perceived depiction of manhood. And now we're switching the gears. How can we allow ourselves to be attended to emotionally by the women in our lives?
I'm gonna jump in real quick and then
One second, brother Femi. Let's let Mike get to that, and then you can jump right in after.
Okay.
Okay, I forget who was speaking before we made the introductions, but I agree to the point where you got to be willing to be vulnerable. You got to be willing to, have that conversation, not on a daily basis, but before issues arrive. So have it often. And also don't be afraid of the outcome of the situation. I mean, I think a lot of what hold us back is the perception of, being seen a certain way, or being afraid to be vulnerable for saying weak, or being afraid to give up this so-called perceived power that you have in the relationship. So I think just that communication aspect of it and having it frequent before it's a larger issue that comes arise.
Thanks.
Yeah, so I think that one of the most powerful ways to teach our women that is by showing them that as well. So if we showed them that if we show them that, how can we teach our women how we need to be cared for? If we show them that, then we open as far as mirroring, we open that space for them to show it right back to us. So we give them that opportunity. But I think the best way to teach anyone, if you show them something and you are that and you behave that way, then more than likely they would see you doing it. So they will fit. That'll create that space quite naturally for them to I guess give it right back to you.
So
now,
I want to
communication too.
I want to state something. You mentioned mirroring, right? So mirroring's, in my opinion, as effective as the person creating that mirror, right? Our actions have to be consistent in order for that mirror to recur.
Mm-hmm.
If we're inconsistent, then that's where the breakdown of what both Mike and Jay mentioned is communication doesn't necessarily work the best of ways. Because I know a lot of times, and I'll throw myself under the microscope, right? I sometimes may not necessarily be consistent in the way I'm doing things, because especially with your partner, you're always growing and learning. All right. The person you were at the beginning may not be the person you are 6, 8, 9, 12 months down the line. And so we have to also be mindful that always be present, always be consistent in how we're communicating as to what we want. So I just want to make sure communication is not just a static thing. It does grow, but as we move and as we grow within those relationships, we should also remind ourselves that, oh, something's changed from what I previous mentioned, because they're only going to mirror from what they remember, and women have a very long memory, right? So we just be mindful of that.
Yeah. So I'm gonna make a comment real quick. Are you on mute? Were you about to say something?
I just want to say one thing on the mirroring thing.
Go ahead.
We have to also be careful as to not just do the action and expect that somebody's going to take that as our mirror, because what I have learned throughout life is a lot of human beings are takers. That's who they are. It's not a personality flaw, it's just who they are. They have to know that they have taken too much. So you have to, while you're mirroring, say, hey, every now and then, this would be nice, to get them to change that mindset. Because like I said, a lot of us come into this as different people than we need to be in the situation. And we have to learn, and you have to help people learn, because a lot of times, just like with your kids, you can keep showing them something, but sometimes if you're not instructing them while you're doing it, it's not going to get through. So you got to do both, in my opinion.
All right, so I got 2 quick points. Anytime I see the word teach women, I always kind of cringe a little bit, because most of the time when I tell women anything, they just ignore me and do whatever they want. But this is my second and my real point. So when women meet men, I think if they don't understand that, they are meeting the tip of the iceberg, and below the surface is that man's journey to them at that point. Like my journey was like, my dad used to abuse my mother. I was mad at him a long time for that. But right before my father died, he told me that him and his family were so poor when they were growing up in North Carolina. He was born in 1948. They were so poor, they got 1 bathtub of water per week for the family to wash up in. He ran bootleg from the time he was 12. And he was just, he was in violent activities. And that's kind of who he was. So it gave me an understanding of like who he was. My mother came up as a white-looking Black person in the civil rights movement, so she hated to be called white. So if somebody doesn't understand where my parents come from and how they raised me, when I do something, they're not going to understand where that comes from. So I think for women to truly understand the man, she has to understand not just who he is today, but like his narrative. Like, I come from a family where my dad, beat my mom up in front of me, and my mom hit my dad over the head with a pan one night because he came in too drunk. And like, that's my experience. But if women don't know all of that background stuff, they'll just be like, oh, he's acting crazy. Or they might completely not understand something I do. When anybody who's seen my family, they're going to be like, oh yeah, that's right in line with why he did that, or that explains why he did something. So for women to truly understand a man, if you don't understand where he came from, like, I don't think you'll ever like truly understand why men make certain decisions and how we respond emotionally, and when we need to be hugged versus when we need our own time. Over.
So now, how are women expected to know that, right? When does that start? I know you mentioned to say it, but like, I'll use myself as an example. Like, the first actual voice conversation with the person that I'm with, I was like, these are my issues. These are the things I experienced in the past. This is what I'm expecting. This is who I am. Like, I literally was willing to like put all the ugliness out there. And if she really wanted me as the person, be here. But everybody, it took me a while to get to that point.
Right.
But everyone's not that willing and open to be that vulnerable from the rip.
Yeah.
How do we get to that point, right? Like, how do we, this is one of many conversations we're going to have this month, but like, how do we get to that point of having that conversation? Because that's not everybody. Everyone's not built to have it from like, look, hi, my name is Paige, and these are my issues, right?
So,
It's
bro,
usually
I would definitely say like don't dump all at once. I would never recommend that. I would say piecemeal. You know, I usually start out with, "Hi, I'm Loco. I have light skinned people problems. Like, I have trauma from being light skinned. It's from my childhood." And I joke with that and I say, "Sit with that." And then I might share a couple of weeks later, like, "Yeah, you know, I come from, I had abuse in my family." And I'll give them that one thing and see how they handle that. But like, you never know who you're gonna stay with. So you don't want to give everybody your full secret files. Just give them like I say piecemeal it a little bit. And like the people who can deal with it are gonna stick around, and the people who can't, like they're gonna stop responding to your text messages and they won't take your calls. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. So
And she's not the one. She's not the one.
she or I mean anybody, because even sometimes I'll talk to the bros and share something with the bros, like for people out there, my fraternity brothers. I'll share something with them, and sometimes I won't get a response, so I'll be like, okay, well he's not that bro that I'm gonna share with, so I'll just drink with him. So it's friends, people you care about. It goes across the spectrum of gender. So
okay. Anybody else?
To lock in on that, the main part about that question where you're like, how do we get to that point? Like you said, once you get to that point, you do not want to dump. But how do you get to that point? I would say is a little self-awareness. I think a lot of times we don't even know our traumas. We don't know enough about what's going on with us in order to be that vulnerable. So a lot of times we don't know it until it gets triggered. So a lot of times we got to sit there and figure out our triggers, figure out our traumas, sit down and talk about our history with ourselves sometimes and write it out. Maybe that'll help you. You kind of got to piecemeal that together so you can know your triggers and be aware of these things so that when it's time to be vulnerable, you know what to say.
Okay. Now, I believe, Jay, are you married currently?
Yeah.
And then, so you and Femi are the only two married people on here, and do you have children as well?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna kind of put you guys on the spotlight, right? How long did it take you guys to get to the point where your significant others understood you enough to be able to allow you into that safe space, into that space of being vulnerable?
I'm going to say that for us, I don't know if it was.
She's watching, so pay attention. Be careful. She's watching.
I don't know if it was a specific time. If we did put a time on it, probably be right after that 7-year gap. The one they always tell you, the dreaded 7 years. But I think that it was more of a situation. We kind of saw some other people and their situations going into a downfall, and other marriages going into a downfall, and watching it kind of made us sit back and say, oh, we need to really look into ours and talk about it. And when we sat down and had that real conversation, it brought out a lot of what her triggers were, what my triggers were, what are some issues that we need to look into and maybe we can help each other with. Some of it was about being self-aware as to what issues I may have that I need to take care of that have nothing to do with her, and then the ones I have with her. So a lot of that came from watching other people. And I'm glad it wasn't us, but I'm saying this so other people can hear it and say, hey, I need to have that situation before it becomes me.
Yeah, you're right. I would say it was like when we first met, I was at the point where, I was tired of running around. So I shared some stuff with her, and depending on how, and she took it like, okay, that's thanks for sharing that. And then she shared a little bit about her. So it was okay, so I open up, she opens up. So I was like, okay, so we're going somewhere. And then over the years, we got to the point where, well, we're still getting there. I mean, we're 10 years in, but it's like we're committed, we're committed, and we respect each other, and even though we may get upset at each other, but we get past it, and it's communication plays a big part. But it's in terms of whether she'll I mean, it's still things that we're learning of each other, so that's going to take more years to come. But I think it's a lot more that we haven't shared. But we it's all in our action. I mean, and if I think the fact that we have communication, an open line of communication, and we trust each other, I think that lays the groundwork for us to show each other our real selves.
So
And
Femi, does your African culture like play a role in that?
yeah, it does play a role in that. But it's pretty similar though, because she has Caribbean culture, so it's not too far, it's not too different, so certain things, like the fact that and she's not watching this, but she is. But I tell my friends this. I like I like, I tell my friends this just in joking that, my grandfather had 4 wives, right? And I tell my friends that, maybe that kind of has an effect on me, you know what I mean? And my dad, he stopped that, but he didn't do that. But the fact that I saw 4 grandmothers growing up in Nigeria, that it's like, damn, man, this dude got 4 women just catering to him. And sometimes in my younger years, in my marriage also, I had that my head on swivel. But the older I get, and the more that I realize that, and even her, and then in the situation that her dad is in, being from Guyana, he has prior marriages, and so. But the fact of the matter is, we respect each other, and we're devoted to each other, and we're willing to learn about each other. And whatever rears its ugly head at this point, we're gonna work through it. We're gonna work through it, and we're committed to work through it. And I told her, and I think it's also the fact that our parents are still together to this day. Her parents are still together. My parents are still together. And I had this mentor a long time ago, and he told me this one thing. He was like, okay, Femi, you looking to get married? Your parents are together. Just try to hook up with someone whose parents are still together as well. Y'all still hear me?
Yeah.
Yes,
No, we can still hear you.
And he was like, go ahead.
I want to say real quick, like, I want to thank you guys first off, because you mentioned the trusting and the fact of opening up, and the fact that we are all here today opening up in front of everybody. And so with that being said, we're in a pioneering space. So I want to actually ask you guys, like, how do you see yourself, or where do you see your place in actually changing this systemic issue in our community?
Which systemic issue are you talking about?
The lack of awareness of our mental health.
Oh, so I'll let somebody else take that, because I'm trying to. I don't know if it's awareness or not. I think it's there. I think it's just the stigma attached to it, where, like, I've suggested to people, hey, maybe talking to somebody, you have to be really careful the way you word it, because people are super sensitive. I say, oh, maybe you should talk to somebody, because when I see you need to see a psychiatrist, or you need to see a therapist, people get super defensive. Oh, I'm not crazy. I'm fine. I got Jesus. I'm good. Bro, y'all know how that is. Y'all know how our community is. I'm gonna pray myself through this. So it's. I think the awareness is there, but I think fear. And I'll touch on this in a second. Fear is like it's like real, and I'll come back to fear in terms of, like, I have a perspective of I'm divorced. So some of my deep secrets that I shared with my ex-wife are now with her wherever she's at. So if she ever wanted to get dirty and nasty with me, now I'm just like, oh, now she knows some of my deepest stuff. So that's kind of where I'm at. But
So let me add to Copeland's question, right? So some of the systemic issues that we talked about earlier were, the societal's version of what masculinity looks like, right? Hyper masculinity. How do we overcome the stigma of mental health being something just for crazy people, right? How do we define the way we should communicate with our loved ones, our significant others? Because one of the things that we want to do with this show is not just talk about the problem, right? Is how do we move forward with the problem? So with all of the things that we talked on, which I think we talked about in a good amount of time, like just pick one thing that we've talked about in the previous conversations. What are some things that we think we can do to kind of push us along with this conversation, whether it be manhood, whether it be hypermasculinity, whether it be societal norms keeping us from actually growing as an individuals? So anybody can really pick on that. And Mike, you've been a little quiet, so I might have to pick on you. You know, but yeah, go ahead on that.
Yeah, I think it is a difficult question to answer just on a more holistic level because you never know what type of issue someone is going through. Not even your friends, not even your family. You never know what their level of mental fitness is. It's not like the physical. You can't see when someone's, been eating too much and you're like, oh, maybe you should work out or maybe you should see someone. So I think you got to be first just like willing to reach out to people. Even if you're not the person that normally do so, even if someone's always reaching out to you, it's an area where I'm like historically bad at that I try to improve on. Just talking to the people I love, seeing not only like how they're doing in their work or how they're doing in their dating life, but how they're doing in life in general. So I think that's a step in the right direction in doing that. Just not only with your close friends, your family, but maybe even a coworker or someone you don't know as closely, because that one question can spark so many positive movements in their life. So I think just having it top of mind and just talking to people and having real conversations as much as possible.
I would say that on all these topics, it's starting with your three immediate circles. That's your family and friends. You know what I'm saying? You want to start there, start being the change around your family and friends. Your behavior a lot of times can affect how other people do things. My dad is old school, but a lot of the things he does now are because of how I act. Things I learned, I've started doing that to him, and so he kind of in return does it to me and his grandchildren. So those are the things that I would say start there. Then branch out, see your family, your friends, your circle, their friends, and have them do the same things. Do that in front of them. Be that kind of change. And then once you get all the way out to your community, find somewhere to volunteer. Get in front of, our future Black men, other youth, the young ladies too, because it's going to take a team effort from both of them. And I think a lot of times we focus in on our young Black men, forgetting that they're going to have to deal with these young Black women. So we got to focus on both of them, getting them to understand that what we grew up with it was okay for then, but it's not going to be okay for the future. And if you want to be better, you're going to have to end up fixing those things together.
And my suggestion will be in order, in terms of moving forward, people who are seeing therapists, Black people who are seeing therapists, need to share with their friends. Like my sister told me, my sister, she's not under any crazy amount of stress or anything. She was just like, hey, through my job, I have access to a therapist. So I just went. And she was like, it was one of the best things I've ever done. And she was like, I get to talk to this person who's legally bound to not tell my secrets. And she was like, and this person is professionally trained to like help me kind of come up with these coping mechanisms. So I would, number one, encourage you, if you are out there and you are seeing a therapist, tell your friends and family, if you're comfortable, like that it's a good experience for you. Because just like, nobody wants to be the first one on the dance floor. It's the same, when you're talking about going to see a therapist or sharing that you want to see a therapist. And number two is, if you are a friend of a person who has, episodes where they have mental, breakdowns or whatever, if they share with you, like, listen to what they're saying, like really listen, because I can read all the books and articles in the world about depression and mental illness, and I can make donations and I can wear ribbons. But until I hear somebody's story, like that's like reality. One of my ex-girlfriends told me after big meetings at her job, she gets in this loop where she plays back what she said and how she could have fixed her presentation. And it's a constant loop to the point where she like kind of is sad all of a sudden because she comes up with what she didn't do. And I was like, well, does that only happen during big meetings? And she said, no, I do this with all like big decisions, like with family, with friends, like everything. And I was like, that must be like crushing. And she was like, it is. That's my anxiety. And before she shared that story, I heard anxiety, but I didn't know what it meant. So when your friends share something with you, like, listen, like, because it'll help them and it'll help you do better in terms of like, responding to them. And that goes back to how do we teach women how to treat us emotionally? Like, there has to be a listening and there has to be a sharing. So
you said something very important that I want to jump in on. As far as especially about the therapy and things of that nature, the easiest way to explain it to people is, for anything that you don't want to have a big problem, whether that be your car, whether it be your health, whether it be anything, you do what's called maintenance. You go and see a doctor annually every 6 months, depending on how your health is, to make sure that there isn't a big problem that you need to focus in on. You take your car in every 3,000, 5,000 miles, make sure there isn't a big problem. Same thing needs to be happening for your brain, for your mental health. You need to talk it out before something major happens, and you are not prepared for that. And that's the way I would explain it to somebody who doesn't understand why you want to do something like go see a therapist or a psychiatrist or anything like that.
And Local, you actually touched on something really, really something personal to me is I didn't know what anxiety was or what it looked like for a very long time. I've been in therapy for about 5 years now, dealing with a lot of different things, personal growth, relational growth, emotional growth. I remember before every step show, I'd have my heart would race. Like I didn't know I had performance anxiety on top of other anxieties. And it wasn't realized till I started therapy. And not only just starting therapy, once again, I like what you said. If you're in therapy, share, because the hardest part of therapy is not actually going to therapy. It's being open and honest about what you're there for. I literally had the false impression of sit on the couch, just say what you feel like saying and keep it moving, right? I went from being guarded with what I'm really feeling to today, the most outlandish things come out my mouth, and I really have to apologize at the end of the session, just because sometimes you have to release that. But my therapist says it's okay. If this is the only place that you can say this, because some of these things you shouldn't say in public, then I'm happy that you're able to release it. Because when we're stuck with our thoughts, like a lot of us have been the past 18 or so months, it can really play a toll on you. And especially as you mentioned earlier, not having a person to share that with can be even more stressful, right? And I appreciate you sharing that, because it's not easy to just talk about your feelings, right? Let alone with a stranger. Now, I like the fact that it's a stranger that's not allowed to tell anybody else about it.
Yes.
And then the other side of it is, I like the fact that both Femi and JC was able to talk about being able to communicate to their partners about what they're going through and seeing what other people are going through. Some of us also may need couples therapy or couples counseling, right? I'm not sure if you and Femi went through that, but I'm going through that right now just because I want to make sure we're starting into something very prepared, because we both have our triggers, we both have our situations where we may not completely understand each other. And sometimes it's because, like, and JC, you could probably chime in on this. Two people joining their worlds together is not the easiest of things. And you said the 7-year gap. I personally ain't got 7 years of patience, right? um
Correct.
and so it doesn't have to get to 7 years, it may sometimes take that, but we're in a day and age where, as Dr. Julian mentioned, we need to demystify the idea of therapy or counseling, as a something of there's trouble, right? It can be used as a precursor for something amazing and to become something amazing. Because our billionaires, millionaires in the world have coaches, right? You can't say Bezos, Cuban, Musk, all of these people don't have somebody that they kind of like hype them up and kind of like keep them to a place. Why can't we as a community have that person to help us diffuse some of our anger issues, some of our anxiety issues, some of our emotional issues? I think those, once again, I'm trying not to speak too much, but I think it's very important that we kind of put that out there.
You
Anybody else
hitting,
want to touch on that?
you hitting
Yeah,
some
I
very
want to touch
important
on
points.
it real quick.
Go ahead.
Wait, was somebody else gonna say? Were you gonna say something, Jay?
Yeah, I was just gonna throw in there that
Go ahead.
a quick thing about what he's saying. Um, Not only going out there to seek that help and demystifying it, but knowing that you're trying to find the best situation for you, because a therapist is like finding the right barber. And I say that to the fellas, and once they hear that, they understand it a little bit better. They're like, "Oh, I tried therapy, I hated it," because you ain't find the right one. You got to go out there and find somebody for you. You're going to get in front of that right person. You got to shop around just like you would do your doctor. I tell people all the time, it doesn't matter what you're looking for, service of any kind, whether that be medical, um, any kind of service that you're looking for, seek the right person for you, because they're going to work with you. They're going to do what you need them to do and help you get to the root of the issues you need to get to.
And to add to that, one of the things that Cheese on My Cracker is trying to do is just that, right? Be able to kind of demystify the whole idea of mental health, as well as we got a bunch of intelligent psych 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 D people on the call, on the live right now, who is all about trying to do that and making sure that we can find the right resources. I know I struggled and realized trying to figure out how to find a therapist. Your insurance plan has a list. There's several lists out there to try to find somebody. The struggle sometimes is finding somebody look like us, right? Somebody that understands our struggle. There's a lot of the others that are in the list. They don't necessarily always take our insurance. So understanding that process is something that we're also working towards to make sure that people understand that, like you said, it's not a one size fit all. You really got to find that person. You got to keep looking until you find that one person. You're gonna say something, Copeland?
Yeah, you actually kind of touched on it a little bit, but I wanted to really like make it a thing that therapy isn't, and I guess maybe this might demystify and destigmatize it, because therapy isn't just for broken individuals. Like, I don't know if I said this in the production call or here, but I look at myself as top 5% of the dopest individuals on the planet, but there came a point, but I now have a son. And before I had a son, I thought I was top 5. And now I have a son who is like major motivation for me to be better, even still. And so I reach out to a therapist all the time. And I say reach out to him because I need to probably start paying him and just giving him some money, because it's a really good friend of mine who's a therapist, but he really I know the type of therapy that he does. And I would recommend that anybody would reach out to him because he's helped me where in places where I never even thought that I needed help. So it's not so much that you go to therapy because something is broken or something is wrong. Like sometimes you just need a sounding board, and like, we spend most of our lives plugging holes. Like we can pat ourselves on the back about that, but sometimes there's blind spots that we don't see. And it's really good to have somebody who's trained in seeing those blind spots for you and helping you to because we can all be better no matter no matter how good we are, we can always be better. And like I believe in that always trying to grow aspect. But like I said, I'm doing it for my son, so it's easy at
So
this point.
so with that said, where do we go from here? Right? Like that's usually the biggest questions after conversations like this is we've talked about it. We talked about things that we can do to improve our situations, how to overcome some of our obstacles and some of the systems and guesses. Where do we go from here? How do we continue this conversation such that it doesn't stop as just a conversation? How do we go into our communities and advocate for the need of mental health services in our churches, mental health services already in some schools, right? Mental health services in our communities, such that people know, well, if you need help, there's this, that, and the other. Like, what are some suggestions you guys have for your individual communities that you think would be a good next step? Because this conversation shouldn't be the end all for what we're trying to do here.
So I wanna start with that. Um, I mean, quick history lesson. Like we are living someone else's culture right now. You know, we integrated into the American culture. I mean, we were brought here on boats, and then we had to learn their ways, and we still have to learn their ways. We call it code switching. You know, wearing the mask. So we live in two worlds, and this has been mentioned by many historians and Black philosophers. But we have to get comfortable with like our world and like kind of recognize and manage the fact that yeah, we're in a society where we're targets and we're racist, and I mean there are racists out there, and I think that we need to kind of have community programs from like birth that teach people, listen, there's pressures out here because you know you want to be at this certain level, and everybody says, well, I'm not there yet, so I want to get to this level, versus just saying, like Cope said, understanding that you're a dope individual and like being happy, like inside first, and then focusing on what you have on the outside. A lot of people in our community focus on what they have on the outside, and that's where their source of happiness comes from. So I think we need to have like a community program and teach people like, you know, I always say life is simple, we make it hard. So if somebody's happy where they're at, and you're not killing yourself trying to be like, a millionaire, you're just focusing on being happy. I think that will relieve a lot of the stress and the mental pressure. But that's the society we live in. I mean, it's capitalist society. You need money to survive. Over.
So I'm gonna drop in a couple questions from the chat here. What is your therapy and how do you take a mental break from the stresses and pressures you manage?
I mean, real quick, I'll go quickly to answer this question. I didn't even know that I needed it. Like, to be honest, I smoke a lot of weed, so I be thinking, I'm straight all the time because I smoke all the time. So I just be thinking I'm fine. It's not until literally like a week of off behavior, which doesn't even feel off because it's a necessary reaction to a situation I got to survive. I look back and I'm like, yo, like there's some places where I didn't even show up. Like I wasn't okay. Like I was a rudderless ship. Like I made it to my destination, but I wasn't in a good space there. And so, it's new. I don't even know. I don't know what I would do to manage my stresses because I'm just now learning that I have some.
So I'm gonna just bounce a real quick question at you. Do you think that your weed consumption is suppressive of the stresses that you're going through to allow you to keep going? So because as you mentioned, things are building up to a place where you're in a you're just a rudder, right? Just going through the motions. Do you think that that's what's been happening? That in some cases it's just kind of, all right, let me just take this J, keep going on with my life, not worrying about it.
Oh, no. So before I would have said no, because I really like weed. Like I just like it. Like even in a good day, it's like let me still get some of this, But I do know that stress is literally there's a physical reaction to it. Like there's a physical thing that goes on when you're under stress, and I don't know that I get that physical thing that happens, because if when I get stressed, my reaction to it is, what's the problem? Let's solve the problem. 9 times out of 10, the solution is grind harder. You know what I mean? Like go hard. So that's what I do. And and it's like when these ships are in these battles and they've taken damage, they're like, divert all energy to the thrusters or whatever. So that's what I do. I divert all my energy to the thrusters. Communications down. Like the communications is immediately down. But all my, we divert it to the thrusters until the droids can get everything where we got to get to. And then it's like, hey, somebody hits me and they're like, Cope, where have you been? I mean, I'm like, what do you mean, where have I been? This is what we do. We're space pirates. But so to be honest, it's hard and I don't know where that, I think that comes from. It comes from a lot of things. Like it comes from culture. It comes from thinking somewhat I'm a superhero. Because like I said, I have a 3-year-old son. Like I literally cannot fail. And, so I got to keep going. I can't ever really be like, I can't really woe is me except for in conversation. So it's hard to really say, I don't know. I don't know how to de-stress. Like I just, I feel like the more problems I take care of, the less stress there is. I'm not a depressed person. I don't have anything. I don't have anything really serious. I just have things. And I think that's another part of the therapy conversation, is understanding that there are big T traumas and little T traumas. And we've got to realize that everybody is going through something, and we don't want to be comparing what people go through, but everybody should just be in a place where they feel safe enough to get better at what it is that they're doing. Because I would say that my stuff is small. Like what's bothering me is that I just got to work a little bit more before I can get to see my son. Some people can never see their children. But if I do that to myself, then I'm kind of cheating myself in a sort of way. So it's just recognizing we're all going through this human experience.
So I want to jump in because I was a licensed massage therapist for 10 years. So I actually have an in-depth knowledge of stress and what it does to the body. So when you are stressed, just a quick kind of lesson on that. Cortisol floods your body, and cortisol suppresses the immune system. Your body, it affects fat distribution throughout your body. So people who are stressed tend to have more fat around their midsection, and they gain weight differently. So what I do as a massage therapist, what I've learned is breathing exercises. It's free. You can do it anywhere. Working in a corporate environment, when I knew something racist was happening, I would just take a deep breath. I do a count. I do a 3-count inhale and a 6-second exhale. And for people who can like really learn how to relax, you do a 4-second inhale and an 8-second exhale. And you do that 3 or 4 times. It relaxes your muscles. It lowers your blood pressure. And you could do that at any point. So when Brother Cope said he just grinds, brother, you are building more stress onto your plate. And I get it. You were doing it for your child, so I'm not going to knock it. But at some point, take some time out of your day to stop, do some breathing exercises, take a walk around the building or walk through the park and just look at some trees and it kind of helps your brain reset, and it lowers your blood pressure, it lowers your cortisol levels. So a lot of what we can do as people is like take care of ourselves, and that'll help us take care of the people we love even better.
And going into what the question was, my therapy is therapy. Like, you know, a lot of people acting like, oh, I do this, and this. Yeah, all that is great. But sometimes you just need therapy. And it doesn't matter if it's a little T or a big T. What I tell people is that's what the HIPAA exists for. Because just because your problem is a little problem, or it may be to somebody else, that doesn't mean it's a little problem to you. It may be the little thing that keeps hitting you every day. And, you know, I told you, you can take a small, tiny pickaxe and go at the iceberg like this every single day, 1 second at a time. You can eventually take that down. You can take a tree down the same way. So it may not get you today, but at some point it will get you. Like you said, it's a buildup. And as that buildup is happening, you're thinking, oh, well, I'm going to be good once I get all these things taken care of. You got to make it to that point. And if you don't make it to that point, it's like saying I'm going to drive this truck without no gas until I can. You got to put some gas in there at some point. You can't just think, oh, if I just get another mile, I'm good. No, man, you need that gas now. So go get
you can't drive on E for too long.
I'm definitely it got another 30 miles in it.
you sound like I know my car.
Says the man in the 18-wheeler.
Right.
I mean, so it happens once or twice. I have had to like get a road call and somebody had to come out and bring me gas. And the funniest thing about that, to piggyback on Loco and Jay, what you're saying, I was a licensed neuromuscular massage therapist for 5 years myself. When you're in those moments, sometimes it's hard without training outside of the moments to know when you're in that moment that you need to do some of these things. Because I didn't even realize that I was like stressing. Because like I said, I'm always kind of grinding. So it's, I don't know. I just say it to say that there's a lot of people out there who don't realize that they need therapy. And there's got to be a way. I guess I'm kind of posing a situational type of question as to how do we bridge that gap? Because I truly, you know, I feel like as a host, I should have an answer to some of my questions. You guys just made me think of this, and I have no idea. The same as I didn't know how to actually enact the reaching out for something that's not tangible. It's like Superman coming to you and being like, "I need a hug." You're gonna be like, what?
I mean, as Clark Kent, he does though, right? And that follows up with the question. Another question: Does intimacy help? Right? Does it help, or does it? You know, look. Once again, Jay, she might be watching.
This question is loaded. That's why I said that. But that's what I'm saying. This question is loaded because a lot of times we get into a point of, first of all, a lot of us don't even know what intimacy is. Let's just start there. A lot of my fellas don't. You know, we're getting better as we're getting older, but a lot of us don't even know. A lot of us don't even know, hey, we want to be the little spoon every now and then. We want somebody to just let us lay on their lap and rub our head. And it's hard to express that too because, you know, you're a big old man and you want to be able to say, hey, can I just lay down and, you know, not all this other stuff. I just want my head rubbed or something like that. But, you know, it helps in the moment. Everything that brings you peace helps. Let's start there. Everything that can bring you any kind of peace helps. But I think going back to what Cole was talking about, we don't know these things because we don't have enough of these conversations. That's the reason you're having these questions without any answers, because now you're having the conversation. We need to have these conversations more. We need to talk to more people in our circle and have these conversations more so that they'll say something that may trigger something that'll tell you that there's something going wrong. Because that thing is the knowledge that we are missing. And you can't be blamed for something you don't know, but you only know what you see. If you ain't out there trying to get information, having more conversations, you won't know. So that's why you're having those questions, more questions than answers, because you're having a conversation that's triggering some things that make you kind of look back and see, what is not an issue for you.
So I got this one question before I want Mike to jump in, but Dante, once Mike is done, can you kind of do a follow up response to this? Because I really want to tackle this real quick. But go ahead, Mike.
Is this the intimacy question or whether
Yeah.
it helps? I think it will probably help in the short term, depending on how you, uh, you know, define intimacy. But I think you got to take a longer term approach. You got to also be self responsible for your own mental healing, and if you're allowing intimacy, however you define it, play a large role in how you handle stress or how you navigate stress, then you're becoming too reliant on someone else to fix your mental issues for you. So I think in the short term, yes. In the long term, you probably want to be more proactive in taking uh, more independent steps to handling your stress.
Okay. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. We got another follow up question. How do we fall in love with who we are?
That takes time. It takes time, and it takes wisdom. Because I didn't. I mean, like Cope keeps saying, he think he's one of the baddest dudes on the planet. Me too. I always tell people, I'm a bad mother. Shut your mouth. Um, but like I've always loved who I am because I mentioned earlier I had a very loving family. So it wasn't like I just mentally like told myself like, yeah, I love me. I just had like people around me, even my friends, the bruhs, like my family members have always like loved me and hugged me. And we always said, I love you. And every time I did something, they were like, that was great. You the man, keep going. So I had that. So my being in love with myself, and I always tell people I'm the happiest person I know. I think that's because of my family. So it's an everyday journey to stay that way. But again, there's a sliding scale of people who, they have that confidence because they had a good family. And then there's people who had a very crappy upbringing, or they got like, just family members who were just, stealing money from them and lying and, doing all types of crazy stuff. So, that's going to be harder for some people than it is for others. And just a quick comment on the intimacy thing. When you're intimate with someone, if you're talking about sex, just remember that also puts you in a different like chemical and hormonal state. So like when you're intimate with somebody, like you have this high, you have endorphins shooting into your body, and you're like, oh, I feel better. But then 2 or 3 hours later, when those endorphins go back down, those problems are still looking you in your face. So I would just say, be careful trying to use intimacy, the sexual intimacy, as a way to reduce like mental or heal mental health.
Yeah, I wish I had Copes and Locos like um personality, right? Um I am still struggling with loving myself, right? It's one of the hardest things for me to do. Youngest of many kids, um very tough West Indian parents. Um but I'm not using all of that to kind of be the backdrop of why. A lot of for me was societal, right? Like not fitting in because I was Haitian, not fitting in because one, I didn't think I was handsome or am handsome. So I think there are things that some of us deal with that we don't always communicate about. And it's not just a gender thing a lot of the time, right? Both men and women go through the same issues. It's just some of us get to that point of loving themselves a lot sooner than others, and some never. But I'm definitely working on it. I'm working on this superhero mentality, just like Copeland and Loco. But I'll say to both Copeland and Loco and Mike as well, you guys are, and CJ, my bad, you're not in the mix because I just don't know you. Um, but you guys are lovable people. You guys are genuinely lovable people that people, when met, want to reciprocate. You know what I mean? Um, Copeland is a little different. He's a larger than life personality, but if you look past the the exterior, you actually see someone that wants to be loved. So I want to say for the three of y'all, and Mike, as quiet as he is today, and that's why I'm picking on him, like he's genuinely a dope dude, just like everybody on this show. And CJ, I bet we met, be the same thing because you've been dropping jewels the whole time.
Can I
I
touch
did
on
want
something real quick? Because I really like what Loco said about family, but then also touching on what you said about society, because I had a very loving family too. Yeah, some of it was loved in the Caribbean way, but I had four brothers, you know, I mean three brothers, yeah, and a sister. Like we used to have fun, like poor or not. Like I had a very loving life. And then, like you said, the people that actually I allowed to meet me, they always showed me love. So I had that, but then I have this internal rebel, nonconformist inside of me, and I recognized at a very young age the points where they were trying to erode me and make me into a nice little tumbled crystal, and I fought that with all of my being. Like a part of my loving myself is almost in rebellion to a system that tells me that I shouldn't. That because I don't get haircuts all the time, I'm not handsome. Because I don't dress up, like I'm not a professional. But at the end of the day, I can get haircuts and I can dress up, and I'm still gonna show up to your event probably smelling like not cologne. You know, like
Smelling like relaxation.
yeah, like I am me. And I think this is exactly what I'm talking about, Melinda, about the social constructs. So I think that because of my constitution as a rebel, the social constructs that were telling me that I'm not who I think I am, because these dummies think I'm not that, made me double down on myself in a way that, looking back on it, a lot of people can look and respect it, but in, like you said, in that moment, everybody's like, well, if I was you, I would have blah 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 blah. And I was like, no, you wouldn't, because if you was me, you wouldn't want to even be there, because I don't want to go there. So it was, I think, because of who I am, because all of those things are a thing. We can't really diminish how important it is to have a loving family, but we also can't diminish the fact that, like Loco said, we're living in somebody else's culture, and this culture doesn't value our beauty the way that we do. You know, like I don't need a haircut to be beautiful, and I know this because of the way how I interact with children. Children don't require the societal aesthetics from you. I can go to kids just like this, and their faces light up, whereas humans will look at me and wonder if I sleep at home, like if I have a key to a house. But kids, and I've always had a better relationship with kids and dogs than I have with adults also.
just to answer both of these questions. How
Say
do
that
you
again, Jay?
love you? I was saying to answer both of the questions, how you love yourself and how you deal with these social constructs. You got to release expectations. A lot of this is putting, it's not even our expectations, it's other people's expectations on ourselves. We carry that. The moment you just lift that off your back, it changes a lot of how you see yourself, how you see everything you're doing, how you view success. You know, a lot of people, we have a success, our view on success is how America views success. And a lot of times that's not personally what we need to be doing. That doesn't personally have anything to do with what will end up being successful for us and how we will be looked upon and what our legacy is. And then the other thing I will always say is be kind to yourself. We compliment all kinds of people. We compliment everything about other people. Compliment yourself. There's nothing wrong with being kind to yourself, because people may say, oh, you're getting a big head. No, because if I can't be kind to me, am I really being kind to anyone else? Is that reality, or am I just saying things because that's the way society wants me to be?
So I wanna jump in real quick. When we talk about social constructs, I see each day we live is like you start with like a full cell phone battery, and like you have mental energy to give to certain things, and you know, as soon as we wake up, you know, we have to you know, put our mask back on. We got to go out here and earn this money. Wearing our mask all day and all the time, it takes some of our energy, and not responding the way we want, because we only get one chance to mess up as Black men in our workplace. So having to be extra careful about what we say at work and the faces we make and the relationships we build, it is draining. It is draining. So by the time I get home and I get to take my mask off, I'm like sitting down and I'm tired, like made it through another day. Now let me call the bros up to see if I can go recharge my battery a little bit. So it's, nobody will ever understand like the cost of being a Black man in America unless you're a Black man, because it's a constant worry of, did I not get this loan because I'm Black? Did I not get this car because I'm Black? Is this police officer going to shoot me because I'm reaching for my ID? Was one of these, racist people on the street going to run me down in their truck and shoot me like they did in Maud Arbery? And we have so many other examples of this where we have to be so careful, and it takes so much of our mental energy. Like that is draining, and that itself contributes to like the mental health of a lot of people. Not everybody's built to deal with this every day, like high levels of stress. Like I'm a cheerleader all the time, and there are times where I just kind of like, I can't take this no more. And then you have to get up and do it again and again and again. It's crushing. It is crushing. And if you don't have people around you to help you, it'll kill you. So,
Mike, I'll let you say the final word, and I got one more piece I want everybody to contribute to.
Yeah, I love Logo's point about being like a cell phone, having that battery. Like when we go out in the world, especially like for me, I'm like in the exclusively white world right now in Austin, much different from DC or other places I live, where I'm interacting with non-Black people more so. I'm interacting with Black people, and I found out that's really draining for me. So it's like I have to be conscious about seeking out people, seeking out experiences that rejuvenate me. Probably it's not going to be on a daily basis, but as frequent as possible, trying to seek out things that give me energy and don't deplete me. And I think whether it's working out or playing golf or journaling or something that take care of me, it allows me to navigate the world a little bit more efficiently. And I think you get a little bit better at it as time goes on. I think I was a little bit worse at it when I was younger. As I'm getting older, I'm feeling that I'm able to navigate these spaces a little bit better without feeling like I'm not being myself in certain situations.
So thank you for that, Mike. It sounds like Mike is gonna head the cheese on my cracker golf outing. So so for those golfers out there, reach out to Mike. I'll drop his IG and we'll have all that information for you guys. I do want to end off on a positive note. Everyone on this panel, can you leave our audience with a positive note, however it is for you guys, so that everyone can start their Mondays off with something that they heard positive, considering all that we experience on a day-to-day basis.
I can go first if y'all want me to. I would say acceptance has really helped me in my maturity. I accept myself for who I am, and one of the biggest things is accepting other people for who they are. I find myself saying, "Well, why would this person do that? Because I wouldn't do it." Well, that's why that person is not me, because they live according to their rules. And once I started accepting that, like for instance, I'll say this person is a jerk, and I expect jerk behavior from them when I get around them. Now, if I'm expecting them to be a good person and they're a jerk, I'm gonna be like, I'm disappointed. This person's always being a jerk. But if I'm like, they're a jerk and then they act like a jerk, I'm like, I expected that. Like it takes less of my energy for me not being mad at somebody for them just being who they are. So my thing is, like, when you know a person is who they are, like, accept that. That's who they are. and don't let it like take your energy because they're doing something that you wouldn't do. So
Thank you.
I would say you're here for a reason. You're important. You got a purpose. You're actually the result of somebody else's manifestation. So when you remember that and you know, wake up every day with that on your mind, I think that changes kind of how you view yourself. You know, remembering that you are important every day is something that we all need to get better at. And remembering that it's okay to fail because at the end of the day, failure is a learning opportunity. So at any point, if you do that, it's okay to do it.
Mike?
Yeah, so I think the beauty of these type of conversations is that we get a better understanding that people, no matter what their background is, no matter how well their life seems to be going, we're always going through something in life. You know, life always has its hurdles, and that's kind of the fun part about it. You know, you get to find a way to get out of the situation that you're currently in and make life more enjoyable, more fruitful for yourself and for your family. And I think no matter what you're going through, just remember the journeys. Far more important than the destination, and you'll get there if you keep on focusing on it, on self improvement and visioning the life that you want for yourself and your family.
Thank you. And Cope, I know you got something for me. Celestial, let's go.
Yeah. So I know that we've been talking about mental health, and I want to just say that we've been talking from the perspective of Black men, but we also understand that, you know, that these are a lot of things that Black women go through as well. And what we're really talking about is this narrative that we have to be strong, or because the narrative is that we're strong, we always want to represent that. And so I just want to say that I know that a lot of people are out there, and a lot of y'all are pushing through it every single day, and you keep going and you keep on showing up. And while you probably should check into some therapy or take a relaxing day, I just want to say personally that I see you and that I know what you're doing. And that in of itself is great. So you can start from a point of greatness and become even greater. Where you are, if there's nothing deficient about it. We just are where we are because of what we've had to do. Because at the end of the day, we could have all not made it here, but we did. So you had to do what you had to do and understand that being here today is kind of a great thing. So let's just keep on getting greater.
And my piece will really be something I tell a lot of people. Be thankful for the gift of the present. Just to touch on everybody's statement, we are here today because it is a gift. Um, uh, and I really want everybody to appreciate the fact that we are still here. Regardless of your stresses, regardless of the things that you're going through, you're here and someone actually appreciates you being here. So with that said, I want to thank everybody that joined and unable to stay on. Um, everybody that joined the conversation in the chats that watched. This is one of a 3-part conversation. This was an amazing discussion. I'm gonna ask my panels to stick around for a little bit longer, but everyone, we thank you. And once again, as Ashley stated on our IG Live, Getting My Cheese Back on My Cracker Foundation is a 501c3 organization that is aiming towards breaking down the barriers to mental wellness within our communities through 3 pillars: financial assistance, identifying therapists or providers that look just like us, and being able to make sure that we can find those therapists within networks, out of networks, and in the times that our people are able to meet with a therapist. So those are the 3 pillars for the moment. We're trying not to bite too much of a chunk of that apple, but as much as we can. And for all of those out there that want to help, please feel free to reach out at us at Cheese on My Cracker on IG and cheeseonmycracker.com website. So thank you very much for joining, everybody, and we hope to see you next week. Peace.